Welcome back to Open Line tonight. My guest tonight is FOP President from Nashville here, James Smallwood. Thanks again for being part of the show tonight.
Absolutely.
We are taking your calls. Numbers at the bottom of the screen, 615-737+. The lines are open, so if you have a question that concerns our police department right here in the metro area, give us a call. This guy can help answer it tonight. I want to dig into some of the numbers. Let's do some number crunching. We were talking about it during the break. It's no secret that you guys are down in the number of officers, and really it's a pretty staggering number. Let's go back and talk first of all about the department staffing, those numbers where we should be and how that's grown with the city.
So at my last check, there was 170 fewer officers on the street today answering calls than we should have in our allocated budget.
And you said that's about 2.5 precincts.
Yeah, to put it in perspective, it's somewhere around 2.5 precincts. That would be the total amount of staffing that we're short right now. Which
is crazy to think about, and what's being missed in the city right now, what officers aren't being able to respond to that's needed.
Well, it's certainly going to result in increased call waiting times. Our response times are going to go up. It's going to take us longer to complete calls, but it also affects our officers in ways that people don't see.
Like what?
When we have shortages, officers can't get time off. They have to work overtime to cover, shortfalls somewhere in the department. They don't get the time to decompress like they need, so it compromises everything as a city and as a police department operation.
So let's talk about that 170 number. What's being done right now to recruit new people?
I think the police department is doing everything they can to recruit people in the front door, but the problem is there's a nationwide recruiting epidemic in law enforcement. They're under so much scrutiny. Everything they do is scrutinized to the last dot, and we should be under scrutiny, but there should also be some community understanding, and we know that the Nashville community supports us. That being said, when you're in the nationwide competition, you need to be shining as a city. And when people look at Nashville, they see broken promises, they see pay raises revoked, they see shortfalls in officers, mandated overtime, and they go, ooh, I don't know if that's something I want. So the more we compromise our pay, the more we compromise our benefits and working conditions for officers, the fewer and fewer candidates we're going to see looking at the city as a potential for them to come to.
So we have fewer people coming in. Has there been a couple of years where we've had a lot of retirements or officers just leaving?
I think with everything going on, the environment we're working in, officers are making that decision and their families are making that decision with them, going, this is no longer a job that I want to have. I'm not being paid commensurate with the responsibilities that I'm taking on. I'm not being treated fairly by my administration, and it's time for me to find a profession where I'm valued as an employee, and they're making that decision to leave. Some of them are going to other counties as law enforcement officers, or they're getting out of it altogether and going to the private sector.
Let's talk about pay, between what Metro Nashville pays, whether it's starting out or you've been on the force for a while, compared to Williamson, Wilson, all of those around, Rutherford. What's the pay disparity?
It used to be there was a pretty decent gap, but some of our larger surrounding counties are starting to get very competitive with Metro, if not better than. So it's not as difficult of a decision for an officer, especially a newer one, to make to leave and go somewhere else. And they know that they'll have the support of their administration. Usually the promises made by the politicians in those cities are kept. They don't have to worry about steps being a political game, and they know that everything that they were told from the start is going to be finished and funded, and they're going to get the equipment they need and the time off they need to do their jobs.
Is what appears to be, and I say appears because I don't have the hard numbers in front of me, but it certainly appears that our violence problem in Nashville is growing. Does that a factor too when it comes to where officers want to put their lives on the line?
Well, I think officers are, wherever they go, they understand that there's violence and there's things that they have to mitigate and get involved in. But certainly in Nashville, we're seeing a growing issue with juvenile crime, and we're seeing a lot of politicians talk about it, but nobody's doing anything about it. One thing that we do as a police department, or rather as the FOP, we have a youth camp every year, and we run 6 camps, 3 girls camps and 3 boys camps, and we bring about 300 kids from the inner city up there to build relationships with police officers, and we've been doing that for over 50 years. We need more activities like that. We need more action from our politicians like that, where we can continue to work with the youth in our community and build those bridges and build friendships so that we can mentor and reduce those violent crimes in the future.
We're going to get to Marcus on the line just a second, so hang tight, Marcus. I am going to get to you. We did talk to the mayor first, though, last week again about this pay disparity, and I want to listen again to what he said. You look around to other counties when we're talking about police officers or our EMTs, are they paid equitably to where we look to other counties right around us? Because we know that there are not enough police officers in this county right now.
Sure. So if you look regionally in Middle Tennessee, we're probably more or less aligned with the surrounding counties. That's really not the challenge right now, and we do need to adjust, especially police pay, because about half of the police officers who start in Nashville in a class are going to be from some other place. They're not going to be from Middle Tennessee. So they can pick up and move somewhere else if they want to, and we're out of alignment when it comes to some of our competitor cities. So we're in the process already of starting to look at comprehensive adjustment of police pay to make sure that we can be competitive. And we did increase starting police pay 6.4% this year, just to try and get us in a little bit better position. We do need to recruit some new officers, though, and we need to retain officers longer. And so pay is part of that, and we're working on that.
That got into the financial shell game, is what y'all are talking about. We were addressing earlier. Your response to what he had to say?
Well, I think he lays it out for us. You know, there's a disparity. If we're comparing ourselves regionally, we're not doing ourselves any favors, because we're not Murfreesboro, we're not Lebanon, we're not Mount Juliet. We're one of the biggest cities in the state of Tennessee, and we've got to compare ourselves with the cities from across the country, like Denver and Chicago and San Francisco, where they're attracting new recruits into their police departments because they have better pay and benefits and working conditions, and we have to shine on that hill and show all these people who are looking for a place to go work, because you heard the mayor himself say it, they're coming from other places to work here. Well, yeah, but we have to attract them here. They're not just going to come here on a whim, so we have to make sure that pay and benefits and working conditions are commensurate with the responsibilities we put on them.
All right, we're going to get back to that issue, but first I do want to go to Marcus. Marcus, thank you for hanging on so long. What's your question tonight or comment?
Yeah, good morning. Good evening to both of you guys.
Yes.
I'd like to also wish the officer, the union president, my condolences to the loss of his comrade.
Thank you.
Officer Anderson, for his service. He looks like a man who was genuinely a good guy.
Yeah.
A guy that I would have been proud to have as my neighbor and as a friend. Aside of that, I would like to bring up issues with the union president, as far as 60-year-old male, black male, who grew up through the era of chief, who was the police chief back in the day, that was basically had an administration that basically it wouldn't be unusual to find a zone car A to be over in zone B or C over his girlfriend's house with the patrol car parked in the front yard. It wasn't unusual to see police chases where police cars were going 100 miles per hour in residential neighborhoods. It wasn't unusual to see somebody show up at the night commissioner's office and say, "What happened to this guy?" Well, he fell down the steps coming up to booking, when they know that he had been beaten up probably by some officers because he probably said some things that were unkind to that officer about his mom or something like that, or General Hospital back in the day by the river, where they used to see numerous counts of police brutality cases. I don't want to go back to the days of Chief Casey. Those days have gone by, and I don't ever want to see this city or any city experience that type of regime. At the same time, there's got to be a balance. Chief Anderson may not be the best police chief. I'm not a Chief Anderson groupie, but I think he's definitely on the right highway of making this a better police department, more accountable, making sure that everybody on both sides are going to be abiding by respect of law and order, whether you're the perpetrator or you're the law officer. There's accountability. And also, I'd like to ask the officer why unions are, when they know that officers have broken the law, like at Eric Garner in New York. I would like what his opinion would be on what happened to that officer who applied the chokehold when he knew that was against the police policy. And I'll hang up and listen. And thank you for your service, sir.
Thank you.
All right. Got a lot to address in there.
Sure.
We'll just start with the obvious one, just generic, because you don't know the specifics of the Eric Garner case. We're not there. But if a police officer knowingly breaks the law, where is the FOP going to stand?
Well, I think if a police officer knowingly breaks the law, then there are avenues that we can take to address that. You're right. I don't know the inner workings and the specifics of the Eric Garner. I only know what I've seen on TV, and we always know that TV doesn't always portray the entire picture. Only the people that were there can portray those pictures, and that's why we have courts and attorneys, and they all have to go through that process, and we hope that the justice system works itself out at the end. But certainly we don't support any police officer knowingly being a criminal, and we certainly think that our police department will make sure that if they know that there's a police officer who's participating in criminal activity, they'll remove them, and they should be removed.
Let's talk about the FOP's relationship with Chief Anderson and the administration of Metro Nashville Police Department. How would you characterize that?
You know, there's certainly a percentage of our members who disagree with a lot of the things that Chief Anderson does, and there's a percentage of our members that don't disagree with a lot of things Chief Anderson does, and we have to navigate those on both sides and make sure that our members' voices are represented at the table when we're talking to them.
Are we more in favor or less in favor of what Chief Anderson is doing when it comes to the FOP?
I think it's a careful balance that we have to work on both sides. I mean, there are certainly times that Chief Anderson has to do what he thinks is best for the department, and the FOP adamantly disagrees with what he's doing. And there are times where we are on the same side. I would not say that there's a more or less. It's just based on the things that are in front of us, and we're certainly we've not been the last ones in line to disagree with him. I can say that.
Do you feel like you have a working relationship where you can both sit down at a table and talk things through?
We certainly sit down and talk things through. Whether or not our opinion is activated, that's not always the case. But Chief Anderson is the chief, and we have to respect that, and he gets to make the decisions. Marcus
also brought up the death of Officer Anderson, and I think it is something that just tore this community up. I mean, he absolutely seemed like a great guy, working a tough shift and doing it with a smile from what it seemed like. What does this do to members across the board? How is the FOP and officers in Metro right now? How are they doing?
You know, I think we were already dealing with a pretty low morale in the police department. Some of that has to do with the question you just asked about the chief. Some of it has to do with the mayor. Some of it has to do with just the scrutiny that police officers are placed under. They know that a majority of the community supports what they do, and they stand behind them. But when they don't hear it day in and day out, it kind of wears on them. And then they see this police officer who is out here working hard and is a wonderful young man, sacrifice his life in the line of duty for something senseless, where a young lady who had been arrested and had quite a lengthy criminal history ran from a police officer on a traffic stop, fled, ran a red light, and crashed into this police officer's car and ultimately killed him. That certainly is it's an impact on our morale. Police officers are certainly thinking, what is this city coming to? Why are our criminals released so quickly back on the streets? And if she had been, detained longer, I don't know the timelines of her sheet, but if she'd been detained longer, maybe this wouldn't happen. So I think there's a lot of questions for our police officers. They're grieving right now. They're trying to find their way through this. It's a difficult time, and we appreciate the community support.
Yeah, absolutely. We're always here to give that to you guys. I do want to touch on something that you touched on right there, was the fact that it seems as though so many people are being arrested, officers are doing their job, and then people are being released. And I can just say, from a news perspective, when we get those news releases into the newsroom, I have noticed in the last 6 to 9 months, the police department news releases will say so-and-so was arrested for committing this crime. Oh, by the way, they were arrested 6 months ago on this crime and then released. Is that intentional?
I certainly couldn't speak for Don Aaron's intentions. He doesn't tell me what he's doing. So I think that's certainly something the media needs to start paying attention to, and our community needs to start paying attention to. Police officers are putting their lives on the line every single day, and they're risking everything they have to maintain safety and peace and order in Nashville. And we just had one lose his life in that endeavor. When we make those arrests and we risk our lives, we expect the criminal justice system to be upheld all the way through. And when we have violent felons coming in and getting out on multiple probations or just being turned loose back on the streets, you're not doing our community any justice, you're not doing our officers any justice, and you're compromising the entire public safety entity of Nashville as a whole.
Do you feel like the problem lies with the DA?
We certainly think there's some issues there. I don't think we've been ashamed to say it in the past. I think the DA needs to start paying attention to his rosters and realizing that these people are coming in for violent crimes, for guns, for domestic violence, for trafficking and all the like. And he likes to say he's a big enforcer on those areas, but when you put the numbers on paper, he's not. And there's always, I hate to come back to the shell game, but there's a shell game on numbers where he says, well, you know, this is what's happening here, this is what's happening here. The reality is our people are being released back onto the street after having committed or been involved in a violent crime, and they're allowed to just go back out and do it again, and there's no consequence. At what point in time are we as a city going to stand up and say enough is enough? We want peace, we want public safety, and that has to be our top priority.
Let's go back to the lines. We have Marilyn on the line. Marilyn, thanks for calling in, being part of the show tonight. What's your question or comment?
Yes, I have two questions, a double-edged question.
Okay.
First of all, considering what he just said about the early release of violent criminals, there was a bill that was trying to be introduced to lower the amount of years for first-degree murder before someone is eligible for parole. What is the police department's view of that? Also, is there not a department or some issue where if police officers see another officer do something where they can give information anonymously, where they will not be targeted after they give that information? I think that would help a lot with other officers coming forward when they see crime, which will also help the public perception of the police and not covering up for those other officers.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good question. Good two questions, by the way. Let's start with the last one first about can police report problems with other officers? Is there an avenue to do that?
Absolutely. I mean, they can go to their supervisors or the Office of Professional Accountability. There are multiple layers or avenues for them to report, and I think we've seen that happen in several instances over the last several years where police officers thought that there was some impropriety going on and they've reported their coworker or something they've seen their coworker done. And there's been discipline up to the point of some people have been terminated for those actions. So,
and criminally charged.
And criminally charged. So I don't think that's an issue with our department. I think our officers hold themselves accountable, and I think our police department holds our officers accountable like no other department in the nation. I think there was a report or a study months ago that said we held our officers more accountable by a rate of 38 to 40% more than others across the country.
And I think Marilyn was going to this part, is can they do so anonymously? Can they make these reports anonymously?
Yeah, I'm sure that they could go to their supervisor. I mean, at some point you can't be anonymous. You could call into the Office of Professional Accountability and say, I'd like to make this report anonymously, and they would certainly investigate it to the fullest. But if it's something that you saw or you witnessed, you're going to have to give your eyewitness account. Okay,
and another thing that Marilyn was talking about, efforts to lower the sentences for some crimes like attempted murder. Are you aware of those efforts, and where would the FOP stand on that?
You know, I haven't seen the legislation she's referring to, and I don't know it in detail. At first take, I would like to think that we probably wouldn't support something like that. We wouldn't want violent offenders getting out on early release if they hadn't shown that they had been rehabilitated. And for things like murder or the like, you're taking somebody else's life, and anything less than life is kind of difficult to explain. So I don't know that we'd support it. I don't know that we didn't support it. I haven't seen the legislation be very difficult for me to say where we stand on it. All right, let's move along to Forrest is on the line. Hi, Forrest. Thanks for being with us.
Hello, Forrest.
Hi. Yes, go ahead.
On the line?
Yep, you got it. Go, Forrest. It's your turn.
Oh, okay. I was wanting to know, are they going to charge that girl that accidentally killed the police officer?
Well, the court.
Are they going to charge her? Are they to charge her as an adult?
Are you wondering if they're going to charge her as an adult or a juvenile?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to hang up so you can listen to your TV, and I can just tell you, because of our news reporting, the case is making its way through the court system at this time. So right now she's in juvenile custody, but that will go back and forth. And yeah, that's certainly that's the other spectrum of the criminal justice system. You know, we make the arrest, we make the charge, and then district attorneys, prosecutors take it from there. We'll duke it out, so. Yeah, in court. I know when it comes to Officer Anderson's case, the young woman's, I should say the girl's, teenager's defense attorney has been pretty vocal thus far about what he thinks about what happened, that she ran a stop sign just like any of us could make that mistake. Do you have a response?
You know, I find it interesting that he would respond in such a manner when a public servant gave his life in the service of this community. I would imagine he has difficulty sleeping at night with that. That man died serving his community and trying to go back up another officer. The reality is that young lady ran a red light and she killed somebody. There's nothing to explain that away. She has to deal and face the consequences that are in front of her.
Okay. On that note, we're going to take another quick break. We're coming right back with more Open Line. Stay with us.